Auston Matthews finally spoke during one of the most tense moments of the Toronto Maple Leafs season. Hours before the March 6th NHL trade deadline, the team was sliding in the standings, players were suddenly scratched from the lineup, and a trade had already been completed. In the middle of that chaos, the Leafs captain broke his silence about the situation. The NHL trade deadline for the 2025-2026 season arrived on March 6th at 3 p.m. Eastern Time. After that moment, teams could not trade players who wanted to participate in the Stanley Cup playoffs. Across the league, front offices rushed to finalize deals before the deadline passed. For the Toronto Maple Leafs, the deadline arrived during one of the most difficult stretches of their season. Toronto had fallen behind in the Eastern Conference standings. According to Reuters, the Maple Leafs were 8 points behind the Boston Bruins for the final wildcard spot. The team had also slipped behind several other teams in the race. The standings pressure grew as losses continued to pile up. The recent record showed the problem clearly. Toronto went 0-3-2 in 5 games. Over a longer stretch, the Maple Leafs posted a 4-9-4 record across 17 games. That run pushed the team further away from a playoff position. The timing made the situation more serious because the team had performed well earlier in the season. Between December 23 and January 12, the Maple Leafs earned points in 10 straight games. That streak kept Toronto in the playoff race during the middle of the season, but after the streak ended, results began to decline. Losses increased and defensive breakdowns became more frequent. In one stretch after the Olympic break, Toronto allowed 14 goals across 3 consecutive losses. That performance drew attention across league coverage. During that period, team captain Auston Matthews addressed the situation directly. His comments became one of the most discussed parts of the Maple Leafs trade deadline story. I mean, I don't think concern is the right word. I just think we need more desperation, more fire, especially to start games. We know the position that we're in, and we need to be the more desperate team every single night. The statement came while trade speculation around the Maple Leafs was already growing. With the deadline approaching, teams across the NHL were evaluating their rosters. Toronto was one of the organizations expected to consider changes. Then another development added more attention to the situation. Before a game against the New Jersey Devils, 3 Maple Leafs players were suddenly removed from the lineup. Scott Lawton, Bobby McMahon, and defenseman Oliver Ekman-Larsson did not play that night. At the same time, Toronto was preparing for another game against the New York Rangers, which would take place only hours before the trade deadline. While lineup decisions and trade speculation continued, the Maple Leafs front office completed one confirmed transaction. Forward Nicholas Roy was traded to the Colorado Avalanche. In return, Toronto received a conditional first-round pick in the 2027 NHL draft and a conditional 5th-round pick in the 2026 draft. Roy had appeared in 59 games during the season. He recorded 5 goals and 15 assists for 20 points. The forward also had championship experience. He won the Stanley Cup with the Vegas Golden Knights in 2023. Across his NHL career, Roy had played 428 games, producing 73 goals and 113 assists for 186 points. The trade became one of the first confirmed moves for Toronto during the deadline period, but attention around the team remained focused on the comments from Auston Matthews and the overall direction of the season. Matthews had already reached a major milestone earlier in the year. In January 2026, he became the all-time leading goal scorer in Toronto Maple Leafs history. The milestone came when Matthews scored his 421 career goal with the franchise. The previous record belonged to Matt Sundin. Matthews reached the mark in 664 NHL games. That achievement placed Matthews at the top of the Maple Leafs goal scoring list and reinforced his role as the team's captain during a critical season. Earlier in the same year, Matthews also played a major role for the United States in international competition. He served as captain of Team USA during the Winter Olympics. After the Olympic tournament ended, Matthews returned quickly to the Maple Leafs lineup as the NHL schedule resumed. After the Olympics, you're coming off a high and coming back here. It's been a whirlwind, 72 hours. It's important to be back here with my teammates and have a good push. Once he returned, the Maple Leafs faced the final stage of the regular season schedule. The team still had more than 20 games remaining. Those games would determine whether Toronto could close the gap in the Eastern Conference standings. During that period, Matthews continued to lead the Maple Leafs in goals. Another key forward, William Nylander, led the team in assists and total points despite missing time earlier due to injury. But the situation surrounding the team remained tense as the trade deadline approached. Players were being scratched from the lineup. A trade had already taken place, and the standings showed the team falling behind in the playoff race. And in the middle of that moment, the captain delivered a message about urgency. Auston Matthews said the team needed more desperation and more fire as the season moved toward its final weeks. His comments came while roster decisions, trades, and playoff pressure were all unfolding at the same time around the Toronto Maple Leafs.
Auston's gone 9 games without a goal.
Yeah.
Offensively, have you seen him forcing it or pushing it?
I don't see him forcing it. He's getting opportunities, and it's tough, and it's tough on him, tough on the team because we need him to produce. It's not like he's not getting his looks. It's just they're not going in right now. He's just got to stick with it. And I think he does a lot of other good things in the game. It's not just about scoring, but he'll come out of it. I have confidence in him, and you know, sometimes you just got to get a greasy goal around the net.
The spotlight inside Toronto's locker room turned suddenly toward the captain. Cameras rolled and reporters waited. Then Craig Barube, head coach of the Toronto Maple Leafs, delivered a blunt message about Auston Matthews. The comment spread across hockey media within hours. The team was already losing games, and Matthews had not scored in 9 straight. What Barube said next changed the tone around the Leafs. The moment happened after another difficult night for the Toronto Maple Leafs. The team had just lost 4-3 in a shootout against the New Jersey Devils. Toronto led the game 3 different times, but the Devils forced overtime and then won in the shootout. Jesper Bratt scored the deciding goal, while Devils goaltender Jacob Markstrom stopped both Toronto attempts. During the game, Toronto still produced offense. Matias Maccelli scored once. William Nylander added another goal. Matthew Knees also scored. Goaltender Anthony Stolarz faced heavy pressure and made 44 saves on 47 shots. But the Devils controlled long stretches of the game and finished with a 47-27 advantage in shots. The loss extended a rough stretch for the Toronto Maple Leafs. The team had not won in several games. Inside the arena, reporters gathered for the post-game press conference. Head coach Craig Barube stepped to the microphone and began answering questions about the team's performance. Soon the questions turned to the captain. Auston Matthews had gone 9 straight games without scoring a goal. The drought became a major topic because Matthews has built his career as one of the NHL's most reliable goal scorers. When reporters asked Barube about the situation, the coach responded directly. It is tough on him and tough on the team. We need him to produce. The comment moved quickly through hockey media and fan discussions. Barube explained that Matthews was still creating chances during games. The problem was that the puck was not going into the net. I don't see him forcing it. He is getting opportunities. It is tough. It is tough on him and tough on the team. The coach also said the chances were still there for the Leafs captain. It is not like he isn't getting his looks. They just aren't going in right now. Still, the lack of goals from the captain remained a major storyline around the team. And as the losing streak continued, the spotlight around Auston Matthews only grew stronger. The attention around the Toronto Maple Leafs did not stop with the scoring drought. Other issues began to build around the team at the same time. Injuries, roster decisions, and trade discussions all appeared during the same stretch of games. One major update came from the team's defense. The Maple Leafs announced that defenseman Chris Tanev would miss the rest of the season after undergoing core muscle surgery. The 36-year-old defenseman suffered the original injury on December 28. Doctors later decided surgery was necessary after recovery attempts did not fully resolve the problem. Tanev had played 11 games for Toronto before the surgery. During that span, he recorded 2 assists and a +8 rating. Team officials said he is expected to return before training camp in September. The loss of a veteran defenseman created another challenge for the Toronto Maple Leafs roster. At the same time, unusual lineup decisions began drawing attention before the Devils game. 3 players were suddenly scratched from the lineup: Scott Laughton, Oliver Ekman-Larsson, and Bobby McMann. Reporters quickly asked Craig Barube about the decision. The coach explained that the situation changed during the day. Things changed as the day went along. We held those guys out. Barube also described how the sudden lineup changes affected the team inside the locker room. It's tough. We want to win games. When you come to the rink and 3 important players aren't in the lineup, it is going to impact the guys. The scratches came during a period when trade discussions were increasing across the NHL. As the trade deadline approached, several teams were adjusting lineups while negotiations continued behind the scenes. Even with those circumstances, Barube pointed to the captain's effort during the Devils game. I thought our captain led the way in that department. He worked and competed. The coach also addressed whether the scoring drought was affecting Auston Matthews mentally. I don't sense it, I don't see it or hear it from him. Still, Barube acknowledged that extended scoring droughts can affect players internally. But anytime those scorers go a bit of time without scoring, it definitely weighs on him. That is human nature. Earlier in the season, Matthews himself spoke about the team's need for urgency during difficult stretches. I don't think concern is the right word. I just think we need more desperation, more fire. Matthews added another message about the team's approach moving forward. We know the position that we're in, and we need to be the more desperate team every single night. The comments reflected the situation facing the Toronto Maple Leafs. As the season continued, the team was searching for wins. The captain was still chasing his next goal, and the message from the coach had already spread across hockey media. It is tough on him and tough on the team. We need him to produce.
What's your reaction to the addition yesterday, Connor Murphy? Kind of what your experience is playing against him and what you know about him?
Yeah, not fun to play against, which is always a good sign. Just solid player. I think he can really help for sure.
A quiet moment in the Edmonton Oilers locker room suddenly turned into one of the most talked about comments of the NHL trade deadline. Connor McDavid stepped in front of reporters and spoke about Edmonton's newest move. The words were calm, but the message carried weight across the league. A veteran defenseman had just arrived in Edmonton, and McDavid's response quickly caught everyone's attention.
The Edmonton Oilers have traded for a defenseman. That news came about an hour after the Oilers general manager said a new player wouldn't fix their defensive issues.
It's not going to be magical new players. It's going to be the approach that we take as a team, understanding that going through a whole period without getting a lot of scoring chances is okay if you don't give up a lot.
Not long after he spoke with the media, Stan Bowman agreed to trade a second-round pick to the Chicago Blackhawks for Connor Murphy. The 32-year-old defenseman is in the final year of his contract and has 4 goals and 9 assists this season. He's played 805 NHL games between the Blackhawks and Coyotes.
The Edmonton Oilers made a major move before the NHL trade deadline when they acquired defenseman Connor Murphy from the Chicago Blackhawks. The trade sent a 2028 second-round draft pick to Chicago, while the Blackhawks agreed to retain 50% of Murphy's $4.4 million salary cap. The deal brought an experienced defensive player to a team focused on strengthening its blue line before the final stretch of the season.
Yeah, anyway, all right, so the Oilers, not a great start coming out of the Olympic break, giving up quite a few goals. They go and pull the trigger on a deal yesterday. They bring in Connor Murphy. It's a second-round pick in 2028 going to the Chicago Blackhawks. Hawks are going to retain 50%. He's a UFA at the end of the year. Craig, is this a deal that you really like?
Yeah, it is. It's a deal I really like. Connor Murphy's a really solid player, and he's a stable, steady player. The exact type of player that Darnell Nurse needs. Listen,
Murphy entered the Oilers organization with more than 775 games of NHL experience. The defenseman stands 6'4" and is known for playing a physical defensive style. Throughout his career, he has taken on difficult matchups against opposing forwards. Coaches frequently use him on the penalty kill and in late-game defensive situations when protecting a lead. During the current season with Chicago, Murphy appeared in 60 games and recorded 4 goals and 9 assists. His role focused mainly on defensive coverage rather than offensive scoring. He regularly played against top offensive lines and ranked among Chicago's leaders in block shots and defensive zone minutes. Edmonton's decision to add Murphy came after several defensive struggles during the season. Analysts reviewing team performance noted that the Oilers ranked 18th in expected goals allowed at 5-on-5. The penalty killing unit also ranked near the lower tier of the league. These numbers became an important factor as the front office evaluated roster needs before the trade deadline. Connor McDavid addressed the move shortly after it became official. The Oilers captain spoke during media availability and explained how Murphy's playing style has been viewed by players across the league. Not fun to play against, which is always a good sign. Just a solid player. I think he can really help for sure. I do not think you can have too many of those guys. Those guys are extremely valuable, so I'm excited about it. McDavid's statement described the type of defender Murphy has been during his NHL career. Forwards often measure defensemen by how difficult they are to play against along the boards and in front of the net. Murphy built a reputation in that role while playing with the Blackhawks. The Oilers expect Murphy to join a defensive group that includes Darnell Nurse, Evan Bouchard, and Matthias Ekholm. Coaches plan to use him in defensive situations and penalty killing assignments. His presence allows the team to distribute defensive responsibilities more evenly across the lineup. The Western Conference playoff race remained close, and several teams were separated by only a small number of points. Each roster decision during the trade deadline period carried direct impact on playoff position. McDavid continued producing strong numbers during the season. At one point, he recorded 96 points, including 34 goals and 62 assists. His offensive output kept Edmonton among the top scoring teams in the league. The Oilers rely heavily on the combination of McDavid and Leon Draisaitl to generate offense in critical games. Despite that scoring production, Edmonton's recent seasons have ended without a championship. The Oilers reached the Stanley Cup final twice in the previous 2 seasons, but both series ended in losses to the Florida Panthers. Those results placed additional focus on roster improvements entering the new season. Management identified defensive structure as one of the main areas requiring reinforcement. Advanced statistics from the season showed the Oilers allowing 2.37 expected goals against per 60 minutes during 5-on-5 play in certain defensive matchups. Analysts pointed to defensive coverage and penalty killing as areas that needed improvement before the playoffs. Connor Murphy's arrival directly connects to that need. Throughout his career, Murphy has been used as a shutdown defense. Coaches rely on him to block shots, clear the front of the net, and limit scoring chances during defensive zone pressure. These responsibilities often appear during penalty kills and late-game situations when protecting a lead. Murphy also brought leadership experience from Chicago. Before the trade, he served as one of the Blackhawks' alternate captains and remained among the longest tenured players on the roster. His role inside the locker room included mentoring younger defensemen while handling difficult defensive assignments on the ice. Inside Edmonton, the Oilers coaching staff began preparing defensive pairings that could include Murphy alongside veteran defenseman Darnell Nurse. Both players possess large frames and long reach characteristics often used to disrupt opposing forwards near the crease. Coaches expect this pairing to face some of the league's most skilled offensive lines. The trade also reflected the strategy of Oilers general manager Stan Bowman. The front office focused on adding experienced players rather than making major roster changes. changes. By acquiring Murphy with partial salary retention, Edmonton strengthened its defense while keeping its core group of forwards intact. Connor McDavid's remarks about the new addition highlighted how players inside the locker room viewed the move. His description of Murphy as not fun to play against echoed the opinion many NHL forwards share about physical defensemen who protect the defensive zone. As the trade deadline approached, attention across the league remained fixed on whether Edmonton would make additional moves. The Oilers had strengthened one key position, but the playoff race in the Western Conference continued to tighten, and every game began to carry greater weight.
I think they were already sellers, Anson, but I think the way this week has gone, it has the Maple Leafs even considering not just the UFAs, but some of their longer contracted players. I think if people have ideas, they want to call them, just call them and they'll listen to what you have to say. I think they've been very disappointed by the way this year has gone, and they're willing to listen maybe on some things that they wouldn't have been willing to listen on earlier in the year.
A quiet sentence on national television just changed the Maple Leafs' entire trade deadline picture. Elliotte Friedman revealed that Toronto is no longer thinking small. The front office is widening its scope, and more names are now in play than expected. Core stars are not included, but the list is growing, and what that means behind closed doors is only starting to surface. Elliotte Friedman delivered the update during Saturday headlines on Sportsnet. He reported that the Toronto Maple Leafs are expanding what they are willing to consider before the March 6 NHL trade deadline. The original expectation was simple. Toronto would evaluate pending unrestricted free agents and decide whether to move. That plan has now shifted. Friedman said the word around them is they are widening their scope of what they would consider. That statement confirmed the organization is no longer focused only on expiring contracts. The front office is now discussing players who have term remaining on their deals. This changes the trade structure. Players with term often carry more value because acquiring teams control them beyond the season.
He's the captain of the Senators. He's a great captain for the Senators. He's not going anywhere. Auston Matthews, the one thing I can tell you about Matthews is, right before the Olympics, the Maple Leafs called Matthews and his representation, and they said, if we take a step back, and they knew that this was coming even before this week, which has really been ugly for them. If we take a step back, are we going to have a problem with Auston for next year? And they were told, no, there won't be an issue with Auston for next season at that time, right before the Olympics. So they're not looking to move Auston Matthews. I don't think they're looking to move Nylander.
Friedman also made a firm clarification. He stated, I do not think it is anything like Matthews or Nylander. I do not think we are talking about anything like that. That removes Auston Matthews and William Nylander from speculation tied to this report. Both players are under long-term contracts, and their names are not part of the widened discussions described on air. The deadline is set for March 6 at 3 p.m. Eastern Time. That leaves only days for decision. When a team broadens its scope this close to the deadline, it signals active conversations with multiple clubs. Trade talks expand when management evaluates more than rental pieces, and that is what Friedman's update indicates.
Could you see something like that? Maybe a Kiefer Sherwood, a Bobby McMahon, and getting a very, very cheap, under $2 million 20-goal scorer?
Yes, I do think that they could look for a depth forward that fits cap-wise, 100%. Now, historically, they don't like rentals. That has been their play. They don't like guys who are rentals. Sherwood would be a rental. McMahon would be a rental.
One player discussed directly was Bobby McMahon. McMahon is a pending unrestricted free agent. Friedman said McMahon could go either way. He added that the fact McMahon remains with Toronto suggests no offer has yet met the team's expectations. That places his situation in a flexible category. He could stay or he could move, and no final decision has been reported. Friedman also mentioned defenseman Oliver Ekman-Larsson in relation to possible league interest. He said the Edmonton Oilers are looking at options on defense and at center depth. Ekman-Larsson is under contract beyond this season, which fits the widened scope Friedman described. It shows that teams are asking about players with control beyond one playoff run. This development comes while Toronto sits outside a strong playoff position. Recent losses have tightened the race in the Eastern Conference. Teams in that position often reassess strategy. Expanding trade discussions can serve two purposes. It can reshape the current roster, and it can also address longer-term salary structure. Defense discussions are part of that picture. Friedman noted that Edmonton is looking for a right-shot defenseman or a third-line center. He linked Oliver Ekman-Larsson to league interests, pointing out that Ekman-Larsson has experience playing the right side. Ekman-Larsson is signed beyond this season, and his contract status aligns with a broadened strategy. Morgan Rielly's name also surfaced during the segment. Rielly carries a no-movement clause in his contract, and that protection limits trade flexibility. Friedman said he was not certain whether Rielly had been formally discussed, but added that Toronto is considering more things. That statement reflects a wider evaluation of roster options, even if restrictions apply. The Maple Leafs general manager Brad Treliving now faces limited time. The NHL trade deadline remains fixed at 3 p.m. Eastern on March 6, and trades completed after that time are not permitted for postseason eligibility. That firm deadline increases pressure in the final days. Phone calls intensify and offers change quickly. Reports indicate Toronto has struggled since the Olympic break, which has influenced how the front office views its position. When results decline close to the deadline, management often studies whether to sell assets, retain players, or adjust long-term planning. Expanding discussions suggests a broader internal review. Players with expiring contracts still remain part of the process. Bobby McMahon's situation remains unresolved. Friedman's statement that McMahon could go either way shows no final direction has been chosen, and that flexibility can shift quickly if another team presents an offer that meets Toronto